and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very, very high above all the perfidious forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday, April 1st, the day where you shouldn't believe anything that you read. You really shouldn't believe anything you hear. And you should only probably trust half of what you see. All of that being said, normally on April 1st, I do a grand April Fool's Day episode. It's kind of been a tradition at Cowboy State Politics, but I decided this year that there's so much crazy stuff going on in the world. There's numerous stories that any one of them could qualify as the April 1st prank. I shouldn't even prepare one at all. I should just kind of let it ride. And, speaking of letting it ride, well, the Democrats, the Redcoats did that last night at the Sheridan County Republican Party Central Committee meeting. That's right, we held it at the Ramada, and to their credit, as they do every year, the Redcoats made a concerted effort to try to take back the party. And and every year it always turns out this way. You get new precinct people elected, and, they're recruited by either side. And we, of course, on the conservative side of things, do a pretty good job of vetting all of our candidates. But, you're not going to win them all, and you win some, you lose some. The other side, they recruit candidates too, but it's been the history in Sheridan County that the left really doesn't do that great a job recruiting their candidates. And it all becomes blatantly obvious at the election when just about, I shouldn't say every dirty trick they've pulled for the last couple of years comes out, but a lot of them do. Now, there was a motion last night during the meeting to set up two slates of candidates. And the guy that brought the motion, I get his intention, and literally it was, hey, we all know how this is going to turn out, so let's just speed things up and get this over with quick. Now, I've never been in favor of any slates. In fact, I really don't like them. I think that it squelches any sort of debate, and here's why. Even though it became painfully clear through the rest of the evening that there were two sides, and really there wasn't going to be any switching or changing around of votes. Most of the votes ended up being 50-33, and there were 83 possible votes last night. And most of them ended up 50-33, 50-33, 49-34. I mean, just right around that same thing. And actually, it was kind of a recreation of being in the legislature where, and maybe not so much this year, but last session, yeah, where everything was kind of split down the middle and every single vote was 36-26. And that's pretty much what happened last night. 50-33, 50-33. Now, the reason I say that they didn't really vet their candidates really all that well, and by the way, I have the entire meeting recorded, and I haven't gone back to check the recording yet. The sound last night in the Ramada was absolutely horrendous. It was there was feedback all night long. The microphones didn't work right. I mean, it was a train wreck in a dumpster fire. So I haven't gone back and looked at and listened to any of the audio from last night. But my plan is to do that later on today. I've got some other stuff to do. So I thought I'd go through the audio, see if it's worth playing for you. And then if it is, then I'll go ahead and publish the whole thing just so the entire county can hear what happened. And it began with a challenge to the vote total. And the reason behind that was, well, we have this Wyoming Supreme Court ruling that says officers can't vote. Well, you know, I'm no lawyer, nor do I play one on the radio. I do have, I can, however, read. So I sat with a couple of the fellow conservatives last night, and we looked through the Uintah County ruling from the Supreme Court, and it was pretty clear to me that it really didn't apply last night. And it was also made perfectly clear that the meeting was going to follow the bylaws. And in the Republican Party bylaws at the state level and at the county level, it literally says that if you're an officer, you can vote whether or not you're a precinct person. Now, there's some discussion as to whether or not this was ratified at the state level, and I would argue that it was. The 2024 bylaws were ratified at the 2024 convention, so yeah, everything's good to go. And I don't even think that would be a problem, even if it weren't. But anyway, so that was the first thing that happened. And then candidates started filing in. And I made a concerted effort to do some research ahead of time into who these people are and things that they've said and things that they've done in the past. And so, I had a whole bunch of questions lined up for them. Oh, I didn't finish the discussion about the slate. So anyway, that was there was a couple of amendments to it, and I did make an argument saying, look, I think that it's entirely possible that somebody else would like to vote for somebody else on either slate. That's not me personally, but in the room, you never know. And so anyway, that got voted down, and so then we went into each. The typical way that we handle elections: go through each race, give speeches, have a little discussion time, and then vote. One of the ones that was fascinating to me is a guy named Mike Evers. And he seemed like a nice enough fellow. And I stood up and I said, it's fascinating that you bring up Senator Beitman in the letter that you wrote to me. Now, do you ever think it's appropriate to donate, if you're running for a leadership position in the Republican Party, do you think it's appropriate to financially support Democrats over a Republican candidate? And of course, his answer was, no, I don't think that would be appropriate at all. And so I had to wait for another time to get the microphone back. And I said, well, I mean, considering your last answer, why then did you donate to a Democrat candidate who was running against a Republican Senator, Bo Beitman? And he flat denied it in front of the entire crowd. And even when I held up the piece of paper from the Wyoming Secretary of State's website that showed his campaign donation, he still denied it. Now, you would think if you're running that guy to be the vice chair, that you would do a little research into it, that maybe he would have an answer already prepared, knowing that question is probably coming. But it was obvious that he didn't have an answer to any of it, and he wasn't going to answer. In fact, he just stood up there and lied repeatedly about it. And that's kind of how things went last night. Gail Simmons got asked a question I asked her a question about the party platform. She didn't really give her typical response. I've interviewed Gail Simmons twice on the program, and both times she told me exactly the same thing about the platform. However, it was another person that got up and asked her about her view of the first plank of the Republican Party platform, which of course is life. And she went on a bizarre explanation of what that is. And I'm going to have to pull that one out of the recording so I can play it for you. But in the end, it was a clean sweep for conservatives. I don't think that the liberals even stood a chance. And, and true to their nature, it was the liberal redcoats in the room that were the most uncivil. on the one hand, they're standing up calling for compromise and civility and how we should all get along and how we all have to work together. And they were the ones swearing last night. They were the ones with the outbursts all night, even though the entire meeting was run entirely fairly. So, a typical demonstration from Redcoats. They demand civility, they demand compromise, and in the end, they are the least civil people of all. But it was a clean sweep in Sheridan County last night. James Temple is going to be the new Sheridan County chairman. I really like him, and in the very near term, I'll get him on the program, and we'll sit down and have an interview for you to listen to on Cowboy State Politics. Maybe we'll do that in the new place that we're putting together. Also coming up tomorrow on the program, on the podcast anyway. I'll have excerpts ready for it for the live program. But the interview with Gabriel Green, you remember, I guess it was last week where I played some excerpts from a Democrat county meeting here in Sheridan, where this guy named Gabriel Green shows up, and he's got some very interesting things to say about conservatives and about the Freedom Caucus. Well, last Saturday, I sat down with him, and let's just say that he tried to explain away a lot of the things that he said, and most of them were not exactly entirely accurate. So tomorrow on the podcast, you're going to hear that interview in its entirety with Gabriel Green. And then on Saturday's edition of Weekend Update, we're going to go and do a whole history episode with my pal Fred Deshefsky, the owner of U.S. Coin Capital. We're going to talk about whether or not there's actually gold in Fort Knox. And the reason I wanted to talk to Fred about it is that's his business. He trades gold back and forth, lots of it, and figured he would know. And so I asked him. It's a great discussion. The interview lasts about 45 minutes. So that's going to be on Weekend Update. And let's see here. What else is going on? Oh, yeah. Tomorrow, I'm going to sit down with Representative Tom Kelly. And we're going to talk about a number of different things that happened during the session. One that is come up as, a bit of a question. He did an interview, and he talked about how House Bill 64. Now, House Bill 64 passed with overwhelming majorities. Tom was one of the only people that voted against it. The governor vetoed the bill, and then the House overrode that veto. So really, it's a non-issue as far as Wyoming law goes. Now, there's already been a lawsuit filed against it. Go figure. But I think it's worth talking about. In fact, I always think that discussing the importance of life and legislation and laws surrounding it, I always think that that's an important discussion. In fact, I don't even think it's one of those, some discussions are entirely, philosophic in nature, and they end up being, the same things that Republicans and conservatives always bring up. But I don't think that this is one of those. I think it's really an important discussion to have. In that, if we can't agree on life, if we can't agree on the essential thing that allows us to be walking, talking, and being in the world, if we can't agree on whether or not it's okay to kill a baby, then we really don't have much to talk about at all. We're not going to find any common ground past that. In fact, when I first met the lovely Christine, we had a little conversation back and forth, and then very quickly on, in one of our phone conversations, I just came out and said, okay, this is going to sound like a weird question to you, maybe. I said, but this one's important to me. How do you feel about abortion? And to her credit, she says, well, it's murder. Perfect. You're the gal for me. And as things turned out, she is the gal for me. So anyway, I think it's a great discussion to have, and I think we should. And so we're going to do that with Tom on, I'm going to do the interview Wednesday, and it's probably going to be, at this point, I don't even know, but I'll play it for you sometime next week. So lots happening on Cowboy State Politics. On today's program, there's so many stories out today. Any one of them, you could say, that has got to be an April 1st prank. But I kid you not, my friends, there are a whole ton of them that I've done a little trying to check my sources and find out if they're all real. And as far as I'm concerned, they're actually all right on the money. So Tim Walz, he says that the Democrats need to set up a shadow government. Not even kidding. Axios is saying that Trump is going to tax the rich in order to pay for his tax cuts to people that have tips. By the way, those aren't even. Oh God! When you allow people to keep some of their own money, it's always a controversy to Democrats. And Bill Maher is going to go to the White House and meet with Trump. This one I think is fascinating because Bill Maher is not one of your crazy Democrats. He's actually a classic liberal. So that one's interesting. I've got some sound off of that one. And then Judge Boasberg. Yeah, we've been talking about him several times this past week. Well, there's an interesting connection between him and January 6th. In fact, he's the guy that gave Ray Epps a slap on the wrist. Of course, Ray Epps is the only guy during January 6th that actually suggested going into the White House. And magically, he didn't get prosecuted like everybody else did. No, in fact, he disappeared for a while. One day, he was America's Most Wanted. The next day, he was let off on probation. So, anyway, lots to talk about coming up on Cowboy State Politics. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Documented to be almost always right, 99% of the time. I got so caught up telling you what happened during the meeting, I didn't tell you how the meeting last night turned out. I got part of it, but I didn't finish. So in Sheridan County, it is James Temple who's going to be the chairman. A very, very good person. Well, they're all good people, but one I'm very close to. Sharon McWright is going to be the vice chairman. State committee man is longtime committee man Todd Windsor. State committee woman is Carla Kloptenstein. The treasurer is our pal Harry Pollock, and the secretary of the party is Natalie Trampy. So, pretty much turned out exactly as we all predicted. As I'm told, in Park County, the Conservatives also had a clean sweep. Vince Venata is going to be the chairman of the Park County Republican Party. I did not hear how things went in Albany County last night. I'll find that out and report that to you tomorrow. But crossing our fingers, hoping that everything went well down there. But I'll find out today. From Just the News, Tim Walz calls for a shadow government to give the Democratic response to the Trump administration. I can't even believe that. Well, he is dumb enough to say stuff like this. I mean, and it's just what the Democrats do. Whatever they're accusing you of, that's what they're doing. And just about every single time we hear, no, that's a conspiracy theory. None of that is true. And then it turns out to be true. All you got to do is wait a couple months, and exactly what they accused us of being crazy about, yep, that's what they do. So in this case, Tim Walz is calling for a shadow government to give the Democratic response to the Trump administration. And I quote, former Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz on Friday said his party needs to create a shadow government that would emphasize the Democratic response to President Donald Trump's actions. The term is a nod to the United Kingdom, where the opposition party creates its own version of the government that mirrors the country's current government and provides alternative solutions to issues the country is facing. Now, remember, this is coming out of tampon Tim Walz's mouth. Walz, who is currently the governor of Minnesota, said the alternative government is needed to counter the Trump administration's actions on issues like voting rights. Quote, we see one of the first things they do is try to restrict the vote, Walz said at a town hall in Wisconsin. Yeah, this is totally an April Fool's joke. It's got to be. This is one of the things, though, and this is going to take power industry to. I don't know what the answer is, but I've been saying this for a while. I think we need a shadow government. So when all these things come up every single day, we've got an alternative press conference telling the truth about what's actually happening. Tell them what's going on. The comment prompted backlash from Republicans, including Trump's rapid response social media team, who referred to Walz as an unhinged loser. And I quote, unhinged loser Tim Walz wants to form a shadow government in protest of requiring proof of citizenship for voter registration and banning foreign nationals from interfering in elections. The comments come as Democrats struggle to rally around a current party leader in the wake of a poor showing in the 2024 election. Republicans won back the White House, flipped the Senate, and retained control of the House. So, of course, they have to do something. I mean, Democrats don't have a backbench. I've talked about this several times on the program. And it's, this is one of the things where Republicans used to fail at. We'd get a couple of great candidates and we really wouldn't have anybody in reserve. Nobody's manning the far teams. We're not bringing up anybody from the rear. And, we've gotten better at that, especially in Wyoming. The county parties do a great job of recruiting good candidates for office. And, and in this past election, think about it. We got Donald Trump as president. You got J.D. Vance as vice president. There's a whole bunch of really great senators and representatives that are running for governor across the country. And so, I mean, there are many options post-Trump. The Democrats, what do they got? Hakeem Jeffries, Kamala Harris. We've all been unburdened by what has been on that one, but they really don't have anybody to run against J.D. Vance in the 2028 election. They just don't. And I mean, it's all the same tired voices coming from the Democrat side. And, it's so they've got to have all these retreads coming out. And it's the same trope over and over. Republicans are going to wheel grandma off the cliff. They're going to kill Social Security. They hate your Medicare. They hate old people, and definitely going to gut the education system. And your kids are going to be dumbered in a box of rocks. When the truth is, it is conservative solutions that actually make a change. And take this Department of Education thing, for example. The federal Department of Education, first of all, is nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the government needs to educate citizens. I mean, it just doesn't. And the federal bureaucracy, I mean, typically it really doesn't control what happens at the state or local level. Whatever control they do have is managed through bribes. They say, hey, here's this pile of federal money. You have to adopt this curriculum or this program. The classic example of that one was No Child Left Behind. And the reality is that program ended up leaving a lot of children behind. And so Donald Trump is saying, let's get rid of the Department of Education. We don't need it. Get it out of the way and let states run their education system. And the truth is, in Wyoming, the last figure I heard is that federal funding only amounts to about 11% of our education budget. And in Wyoming, we've got the cash. That 11%, we could cover that no problem, and we could just do away with everything the federal government says in regards to education. But the Democrats, their argument against that has always been, well, they're going to destroy education. They hate little children, and these poor teachers. Even though the teachers union, along with federal dollars, that's been divvied up all over the place. They've really done a fantastic bang-up job of destroying education. The United States used to rank near the top. I don't think we ever were on number one in the world in education, but now we're somewhere down near the bottom. I mean, 40th, maybe 50th. Who knows where we're at? Mediocre is where we're at. And we've got to do better, my friends. And the only way you can do better is if you let teachers teach and if you let states figure out how they want to educate their students and get the federal government out of the way, since they have no business being there in the first place. So here's another one from Axios, and I would never... I hardly ever quote these people because most of what they do is lie, and it's appropriate that I'm using one of their pieces on April Fool's Day. But this one is entitled, "Trump Might Let Taxes Rise for the Rich to Cover the Break on Tips." And I quote, "The Trump administration is discussing a surprising option to help fulfill his campaign trail promises, allowing the richest Americans' tax rates to rise in return for cutting taxes on tips. The big picture: some of the White House officials believe letting income taxes on the very highest earners rise would buy breathing room on other priorities and help blunt the Democrats' attacks as they seek to extend Trump's 2017 tax cuts. By the numbers, currently the top income tax rate is 37%, charged on income above $609,000 for an individual or $731,000 for a married couple. In 2017, all right, so this is just furthering the Democrat narrative that you have to pay for tax cuts, that somehow allowing people to keep more of their money is a government expenditure. Well, first of all, it's not. That just means you'll have less money to spend. Anytime you can keep money from the government, I mean, that is not that's not a government expenditure. You don't pay for tax cuts. And really what we ought to be talking about is reducing the level of spending. I just mentioned the Department of Education, where, first of all, it's not the role of the federal government to educate your students. Secondly, it's a giant money suck. I mean, I don't know how many, I bet we've spent trillions of dollars on education. And the result of it's been some of the lowest educational outcomes in the country. If you just look at Wyoming, not that long ago, Charlie Scott had a study, Senator Charlie Scott had a study that pretty much showed that half of eighth graders were not reading at a proficient level or above. And, it's when you have outcomes like that, I mean, your first knee-jerk reaction is, well, we're not doing our job. We're not educating students. Our performance in the other studies has not improved. I mean, Wyoming ranks, and if you look at a lot of the national assessments, and you got to be kind of careful with these because it's depending on which test you make or which test you're looking at, it has a different outcome. But the NAEP, there's several different ones. But the numbers I've looked at is Wyoming is not the top educator in the country. In fact, we're kind of in the middle. Last numbers I looked at, which was a year or so ago, were pretty much in the middle, 19th, 20th, 18th, depending on how you look at it. So we're not doing great by our students, and we get rid of the Department of Education. We can do a lot better. Allow the state to manage their own students, educate students in the way that the state wants. State and local school boards want to educate students, it'll dramatically reduce the spending because it is spending that drives the taxes. See, Democrats always reverse that. They look at tax cuts as an expenditure when really it's not. Take our property tax situation here in Wyoming. For the longest time, the last 4 or 5 years, Wyoming citizens have endured exponential increases in property taxes. And far and above what had been before 2019, 2018. In many cases, property taxes doubled. Well, but to understand that, you have to look at the level of spending. Were we hurting revenue-wise? The answer to that is no. Most local governments, counties, and towns spend an extraordinary amount of money on things that they don't have any business spending money on. $3 million flower pots in Sheridan. You drive down Main Street, there's all sorts of bronze statues, which they pay an extraordinary amount of money for. Murals, I mean, it's one park after another one. I mean, it is a really long... you got bonuses for city and county employees. Sometimes more than once a year. Most people don't even get a raise every year. But city government workers, you betcha, man. Increased wages every single year. So, when you're talking about taxes, you have to first understand that it is the spending that drives the taxes. It's not the reverse. And so anytime you're talking about a tax cut that is allowing people to keep more of their money instead of stealing it, that's not the government spending money. That's forcing you to spend less. Just like everything, Democrats have it backwards. We'll be back after this.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics, on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast, and all you got to do, it's pretty much everywhere. Just type in Cowboy State Politics, and you'll find it. It's on pretty much every single platform, even some of those that I didn't even know existed, but it's pretty easy to find. There's more Cowboy State Politics content coming each and every day. I keep thinking about some of the things that were said last night. Oh, we've got to compromise. Now we've got to work together. And even some of the more conservative candidates were kind of, touting the same line. Well, we've got to work together. We're all Republicans. But the question is, how can you work together with people who continually lie? They misrepresent who they are, and they pretend to be something that they're not. For example, the guy that was running for vice chairman last night, or excuse me, the guy that was running for chairman, Jim Schellinger, he pretty much said, I don't really like some of the things that have been happening. There's two camps. It's so divisive, and there were comments made about the Freedom Caucus. Fortunately, Representative Tom Kelly is a precinct man, and he got up and he said, you've said a lot of things praising the Senate. What was wrong with the House? And Jim Schellinger stood right up there and he said it was divisive and argumentative, and they didn't work together, and they didn't get anything done. Really? Well, there was a lot of legislation that was passed out of the House that died in the Senate. And what we heard from the Senate side, we're all working together. Mm-hmm. Yep, working together on killing good conservative bills. The illegal immigration bill, the great one. It was Senate File 124. There was another one classifying CO2 as a non-pollutant. That was a great bill. Climate, the anti-climate change legislation. Both of those died. Ballot drop boxes. I mean, the list is long and distinguished. There are a bunch of election-related bills that died over in the Senate. And, it's everything we heard from the Senate. We're working together. We're compromising. Okay, well, what you're compromising on is the death of conservative legislation. That's what you're doing. Good bills that have, that have been well vetted, and a lot of work went into them. And whenever Democrats and redcoats say the word compromise, really what they mean is do it our way. It was very clear last night what the platform of the redcoats were, to take everything back to Redcoatville, take it all back to the Democrat playbook, that we don't push conservative principles. I mean, it was very, very clear. So when the left says we have to compromise and we have to work together, that's not really what they mean. And I think a lot of times conservatives get sucked into that. Just look at what happens in Congress, though. There's plenty of blame to go around on both sides of that. But really, it is the Republicans that always cave in the name of working together, because you're not dealing with honest brokers. And recently I've seen a lot of people who were considered conservative in the past saying, oh, no, we got to compromise. We got to work together. I'm calling for a ceasefire. Well, really, you can't call for a ceasefire with people that have no intention of stopping the fight. And make no mistake, the left, they never stop fighting. The left always, they don't take a defeat and then sit down and say, well, I guess we got defeated. We should probably back up and look at this. They figure out another way to push their agenda. And, it's like Rush Limbaugh gave this great speech once, and it was, I call it right all along. And there's this really funny part of it where he says, I've been thinking about moderating my program. Maybe reach some more people, draw some more people in. And he said, so I sent my staff out across the country to look up, and find all the great biographies of all the great moderates in American history. He said, you know what I found? None. I didn't find a single great biography of a great moderate in American history. It's because there aren't any. When you compromise your principles, when you say, well, I guess I can back off on this legislation in the name of compromise, really the only thing you're doing is being dishonest with yourself and with your constituents, by the way. If you believe in something, you ought to stand behind it, not sell out your principles for the sake of gaining power or winning at all costs. And it is absolutely amazing. The folks that I thought were, largely conservative, who pretty much ended up going right along with the liberal narrative. And I guess that's what you get when money and power is involved. But anyway, now one of the guys that I would never accuse of being, inauthentic is Bill Maher. Now, I've played lots of sound bites of Bill Maher on Cowboy State Politics Live, and the reason for it is he's not one of the wacko liberals. He is not a communist. Well, he may be a communist, but he's at least a reasonable one. He several times I've heard him rail against the woke agenda as absolutely stupid. He is, by my definition, one of the classic liberals. Well, there's now a meeting at the White House, and this piece is called From Mediaites, entitled Bill Maher Compares His Upcoming White House Dinner with Donald Trump to Nixon Going to China. You got to try, man. Well, first of all, I don't think that it's of that great magnitude. I suppose you have to start somewhere. But Bill Maher is not Nixon, and Donald Trump is not China. Maybe those roles could be reversed. But this is far less than the left is making it out to be. Just having a conversation is fine, but you have to have two honest brokers. And I think that Bill Maher is an authentic classic liberal. Anyway, here's what the piece says. Quote, Bill Maher compared his upcoming White House dinner with President Trump to Richard Nixon's historic visit to China in 1972, though the comedian admitted he does not have illusions about healing the United States. Maher spoke with News Nation host Chris Cuomo on the Chris Cuomo Project podcast and explained his recently announced dinner with the president. Maher will be visiting the White House soon to break bread with Trump after musician Kid Rock set the pair up. Quote, it was presented as, this is the beginning to heal America. Now, I don't have some sort of complex where I think I can heal America. I can't, okay? Let's be clear. And then he goes on. Actually, you know what? Let's just listen to what Bill Maher had to say. Here it is.
You're going to meet with the president.
I am?
So Kid Rock makes it happen. What do you think has been the response so far? What do you think it will be, and why are you doing it? Which I'm totally for, by the way, and I love it.
I get it. Well, I'm doing it because, first of all, it was presented as
a dare.
not a dare. No, just like, maybe this is a beginning to heal America. No, I don't have some sort of complex where I think I can heal America. I can't. Okay, let's get that clear. I'm not going to be healing America. But if two guys who've been at each other for so long, I mean, it's kind of a Nixon to China thing. I have the credentials. There was nobody who was harder on Trump or more prescient about the fact that he wasn't going to leave office voluntarily than I was. I feel like I have the credentials. But they also respect me because I'm honest about the woke train to crazy town. And I don't shrink from that. And I've also lost a lot of fans for that. The woke people have left the building, and I'm willing to make that sacrifice. But it does give you a certain credibility. So I just think to meet somebody, first of all, it's an honor to be invited to the White House.
Yes, it is.
And I've already had a couple of people who I said to them, I'm just going to take it as a backhanded compliment that you glide right past the idea that little Bill Maher from Rivervale, New Jersey,
all right.
a humble kid.
We get it. Okay, so the whole point here is that it's just a dinner. Why shouldn't we sit down and talk? Now, I absolutely agree with him. I see no problem in talking. What I do see a problem with is compromising your principles, and I don't think that Bill Maher is the guy that's going to do that. He is the same Bill Maher that he has been since forever. I mean, he's said some crazy stuff on his program, but he's always been the classical liberal, and he doesn't buy into the woke agenda, and he thinks that basing your politics on it is kind of a good way not to get elected, which is exactly what the Democrats found out in the 2024 election. So I'm totally in favor of sitting down and having a meal with someone you vehemently disagree with, and Ronald Reagan. And this is a quotation that a lot of people misinterpret. A lot of people on our side misinterpret, the whole 80% of things. What Ronald Reagan said is we probably agree on 80% of those things. So let's focus on those, and we'll worry about the 20% that we don't agree on. And he's talking about Republicans, right? Reagan's big tent. But what people misinterpret is that, if it's just 80% of the time, then we're good. No. What Reagan meant is that we start with agreeing on the foundational principles. In the Republican Party, we agree on the platform. We're all Republicans. It was mentioned last night at the meeting. Well, we all swear an oath to the platform. Okay, yeah, that's right. When we do take our oath of office, yep, we pledge to support the Republican Party platform. All right, so those things are a given. We don't disagree on those. And what Reagan meant is that on everything else, we agree 80% of the time. So let's focus on those things and work on those, and then we'll worry about the 20% that we disagree about later. We all agree on the reasons why we would be a Republican, and that is the Republican Party platform. So a lot of people get that misinterpreted, and it gets used by liberal redcoats to say, well, I agree with the platform 80% of the time. That's not how things work. As a Republican, and the platform absolutely says, we agree that these things are timeless truths. If they are timeless truths, it means you agree with them, that there's very little debate over them, that it's wrong to kill a baby, that we believe in freedom, that your economic freedom is absolutely tied inextricably to your personal freedom. We agree on those things. Okay, here's the building blocks. Then on the rest of the issues, which, there aren't very many that don't correspond to the platform. But, on the rest of things, we can agree 80%, and we'll worry about the 20% that we disagree about later. It's in this case with Bill Maher, there really are probably not going to be that many issues that he and Donald Trump agree on. However, that doesn't mean that they can't sit down and have a cordial dinner and talk things out. Personally, I am totally fine with sitting down with anybody having dinner. I'm absolutely fine with sitting down and having a debate about anything. Tomorrow on the podcast, I'm going to play that Gabriel Green interview. It gets pretty testy at points, but it was a debate, and at the end of it, we stood up and shook hands. We ended up talking, I don't know, for 5 or 10 minutes afterwards. But we're going to play the interview, and I'm going to show you where he wasn't being necessarily honest about what he said. So that's coming up tomorrow on the podcast. When we come back, we're going to finish up this discussion on Bill Maher. He's got some things to say about all of those tweets, and then we'll just continue. Hopefully we get to Boasberg and Ray Epps. Actually, you know what? We're going to do that first. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland. France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day,
program is only going to continue to expand. Cowboy State Politics on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, the Cowboy State Politics Podcast. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on Tuesday, April 1st, April Fool's Day. And if the Redcoats thought they were going to win, well, the joke was on them. Now, before the break, we were talking about Bill Maher and how he's going to go have dinner with the president. I think that's going to be a fascinating meeting to talk about. Now, and I'm going to get to Ray Epps in just a second because I think that's extraordinarily important that you know who the players are. But Bill Maher, he did have some interesting things to say about the NPR CEO's testimony on, let's see here, quote, and this is from Fox News. During his online overtime segment, Maher read a viewer question asking the panel to react to the testimony of NPR CEO Catherine Maher and PBS CEO Paula Kerger, who defended their outlets to the House of Representatives' newly formed Delivering on Government Efficiency Subcommittee. He specifically called out his namesake, Maher, over her repeated assertions that NPR was unbiased. Quote, "Give me a break, lady. I mean, you're crazy, crazy far left." The HBO host went on to say that the country is past the age where the federal government can subsidize outlets like NPR and PBS. Quote, "Why do we need to subsidize? We're so polarized, these outlets became popular at a time when Republicans and Democrats didn't hate each other and weren't at each other's throats and didn't think each other was an existential threat. In that world, you can't have places like this, I think, anymore. They have to be private." Here is what Bill Maher was referring to. Listen to some of this.
Do you believe that America is addicted to white supremacy?
I believe that I tweeted that, and as I've said earlier, I believe much of my thinking has evolved over the last half decade.
It has evolved. Why did you tweet that?
I don't recall the exact context, sir, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay. Do you believe that America believes in black plunder and white democracy?
I don't believe that, sir.
You tweeted that in reference to a book you were reading at the time, apparently, The Case for Reparations.
I don't think I've ever read that book, sir.
You tweeted about it. Said you took a day off to fully read The Case for Reparations. You put that on Twitter in January of 2020.
Apologies, I don't recall that I did.
Oh, yeah.
I have no doubt that...
Anyway, it goes on for the next, I don't know, couple of minutes. Absolutely hilarious. But that's the CEO of NPR. And, you know, I mean, Bill Maher is just a perfect example where he's your classic liberal. He's not one of these left-wing nut jobs. Even he thinks that PBS is a load of crap. From Revolver News, and this one, we should have guessed, we should have seen this one coming. Judge Boasberg and Ray Epps have a connection, and it should scare every American. And I quote, James Boasberg, he's the judge that's been fouling up Donald Trump's deportation plans. He isn't some just random D.C. judge. He's the deep state's go-to gavel. He's a loyal foot soldier in the left's lawfare machine. When the swamp needs a ruling to punish the right and protect their own, Boasberg always delivers. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the case of the very mysterious character Ray Epps. In a speech, when Harriet Hageman was running the first time, she made a big point to say, "Who the heck is Ray Epps?" The reason is we don't really know a lot about Ray Epps. He was one of the provocateurs prior to January 6th, actually the night before, and he then kind of disappeared, and he didn't get sent to prison. You would think if he were, I mean, look at all the people that got sent to prison over January 6th. None of them were on video saying, we have to storm the Capitol, but Ray Epps was. But he didn't get sent to prison. Nope. Listen to this. The connection between these two men, Boasberg and Epps, should concern every American. It's one of the clearest, most flagrant displays of the left's weaponized lawfare to date. In case you've forgotten, Ray Epps is the guy that was caught on camera urging people to storm the Capitol. Here is what that piece that was caught on camera. Listen to this.
Tomorrow, we need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol.
Listen to the crowd.
Peacefully, fed
Okay. So that's the night before, and he said, we need to go into the Capitol. And the crowd reacts to him going, no, you're a Fed. So in my opinion, they correctly identified Ray Epps as a provocateur that was trying to get something started. Back to the piece. Multiple videos show Ray Epps repeatedly urging crowds, multiple different crowds, in Washington, D.C. on January 5th and 6th to go into the Capitol and breach the building. Epps is the one person seen on video doing this. Revolver's Darren Beatty said one of the first to blow the lid off the Ray Epps story back in 2001. He was asking the hard questions the media refused to touch, and many of those questions still haven't been answered. Kash Patel, Trump's new FBI director pick, has also raised serious questions about Ray Epps, and those questions will hopefully be answered now that he's in charge. So the guy that helped lead the charge on January 6th, and who, for years now, somehow avoided the DOJ's obsession with January 6th prosecutions, while grandmas and peaceful protesters were hunted down and dragged through the mud, ended up getting the lightest slap on the wrist from the deep state's biggest anti-Trump rent-a-judge on the planet. After Ray Epps was finally charged with a single count of disorderly conduct, he was rewarded with a wrist slap from Boasberg, 1 year of probation, no jail, no lectures, no talk about mobs or responsibility, just a quiet walk out the back door. Compare that to the treatment of how Boasberg treated a married couple in October of 2023 who were charged with nonviolent misdemeanors for simply being at the Capitol. The husband, Christopher Price, had just learned his cancer had returned. Boasberg sentenced him to 45 days in federal prison anyway. His wife, Cynthia Bellinger, 4 months behind bars. Why? Because according to Boasberg, a mob is only a mob if it has numbers. That's a direct quote. Apparently, those numbers did not apply to Ray Epps. Even worse, Boasberg scolded the couple for lacking remorse and, quote, fighting everything, as if pleading not guilty is somehow a crime. But for Epps, no moral lecture, no tough words, just a gentle pat on the back from the deep state's most dependable judge. Also, let's not forget, this is the same Judge Boasberg who let FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith off with no prison time after Kleinsmith falsified evidence to justify spying on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page during the Russia hoax. Could it be just because that Boasberg is a shameless and very public Trump hater? Just look back at August of 2023 when he was spotted in a courtroom during President Trump's arraignment in D.C., like he was part of the prosecutor's cheering section. Now, he's bending over backwards to defend the, quote, due process rights, as if they have any, of Venezuelan gangbangers, while American citizens continue to rot in prison for the crime of waving a flag on January 6th. Boasberg is also rumored to be the go-to guy for the left's new plot against the Trump administration, Signalgate. This is what so-called justice looks like in D.C. If you're a pawn of the regime, you walk. If you're a MAGA, you rot. And you've got Boasberg on your side. If you've got him on your side, you're hot to trot. So there's definitely a connection between Ray Epps and Boasberg, a Trump-hating judge. And I think that's pretty obvious. It's not an epithet to say that, hey, man, this guy has been anti-never-Trump he's been anti-Trump and never-Trump for the longest time. And here he is. Now he's received at least 2 cases against actions of the Trump administration. I don't think that's a coincidence. In fact, I think that there are no coincidences. And this one, it isn't one either. Well, we burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. Make sure that you stay tuned to Cowboy State Politics Live. It's every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. We've got some changes coming to the program pretty soon. I'm excited to tell you about them. I'm just not quite ready to let that go. Don't miss the podcast tomorrow with Mr. Gabriel Green. It's an interesting one. Man, I just love it when I get to prove that somebody's not telling the truth. And that is kind of Mr. Gabriel Green. But we'll take it all apart tomorrow. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics Live. See you tomorrow, my friends.